Augustine and the use of force. In the 4th century, the Donatists led a movement for purification of the church. They believed that the church should be a pure communion of true believers who demonstrated the truth of the gospel in their lives. Donatists abhorred the apostasy that had come into the church when Constantine wedded Christianity to paganism in order to unify the empire. They considered compromising clergy to be evil priests working hand in glove with the kings of the earth, men who by their conduct show that they have no king but Caesar. To the Donatists, the church was a small body of saved, surrounded by the unregenerate mass. Augustine, on the other hand, saw the church as a mixture of believers and unbelievers, in which purity and evil should be allowed to exist side by side for the sake of unity. He used the power of the state to compel church attendance as Calvin did 1,200 years later. Quote, whoever was not found within the church was not asked the reason, but was to be corrected and converted. End of quote. Calvin followed his mentor Augustine in enforcing church attendance and participation in the sacraments by threats and worse against the citizens of Geneva. Augustine identified the Donatists as heretics, who could be subjected to imperial legislation and force in exactly the same way as other criminals and misbelievers, including poisoners and pagans, period. Friend says of Augustine, quote, the questing, sensitive youth had become the father of the Inquisition, end of quote. Though he preferred persuasion if possible, Augustine supported the death penalty for those who were rebaptized as believers after conversion to Christ and for other alleged heretics, period. In his controversy with the Donatists, using a distorted and unchristian interpretation of Luke chapter 14 verse 23, Augustine made statements for Christianity which sounded like Islam's forceful measures against those who defect from that religion of violence. Why, therefore, should not the church use force in compelling her lost sons to return? The Lord himself said, go out into the highways and hedges and compel them to come in, Wherefore is the power which the church has received, through the religious character and faith of kings, the instrument by which those who are found in the highways and hedges, that is, in heresies and schisms, are compelled to come in, and let them not find fault with being compelled. This is the man whom Calvin admired above all others, and upon whom he relied for much of his theology. Sadly, as we shall see later, Calvin put into effect in Geneva the very principles of punishment, coercion, and death which Augustine advocated. Henry H. Millman puts it well, quote, Augustinism was worked up into a still more rigid and uncompromising system by the severe intellect of Calvin, end of quote. And he justified his actions by the same erroneous interpretation of Luke chapter 14 verse 23, which Augustine had used to justify suppression of the Donatists with military force. Do those who today hail Calvin as a great exegete accept such usage of this passage? Question mark. Luke chapter 14 verse 23. And the Lord said unto the servant, Go out into the highways and hedges, and compel them to come in, that my house may be filled. And let's see what it says in verse 22. And the Lord said, and the servant said, Lord, it is done as thou hast commanded, and yet there is room. Let me read from the beginning. And it came to pass, so this is Luke chapter 14, verse 1. And it came to pass, as he went into the house of one of the chief Pharisees to eat bread on the Sabbath day, that they watched him. And behold, there was a certain man before him which had the dropsy. And Jesus answering spake unto the lawyer and Pharisees, saying, Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day? And they held their peace. And he took him and healed him and let him go. And answered them, saying, Which of you shall have an ass or an ox fallen into a pit, and will not straightway pull him out on the Sabbath day? And they could not answer him again to these things. And he put forth a parable to those which were bidden, when he marked how they chose out the chief rooms, saying unto them, When thou art bidden of any man to a wedding, sit not down in the highest room, lest a more honorable man than thou be bidden of him. And he that bade thee and him come and say to thee, Give this man place, and thou begin with shame to take the lowest room. But when thou art bidden, go and sit down in the lowest room, that when he that bade thee cometh, he may say unto thee, Friend, go up higher. Then shalt thou have worship in the presence of them that sit at meat with them. For whosoever exalteth himself shall be abased, and he that humbleth himself shall be exalted. Then said he also to him that bade him, When thou makest a dinner or a supper, call not thy friends, nor thy brethren, neither thy kinsmen, nor thy rich neighbors, lest they also bid thee again, and a recompense be made thee. But when thou makest a feast, call the poor, the maimed, the lame, the blind, and thou shalt be blessed, for they cannot recompense thee, for thou shalt be recompensed at the resurrection of the just. Verse 15. And when one of them that sat at meat with him heard these things, he said unto him, Blessed is he that shall eat bread in the kingdom of God. Then said he unto him, A certain man made a great supper, and bade many, and sent his servant at supper time to say to them that were bidden, Come, for all things are now ready. And they all with one consent began to make excuse. The first one said unto him, I have bought a piece of ground, and I must needs go and see it. I pray thee have me excused. And another said, I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I go to prove them. I pray thee have me excused. And another said, I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come. So that servant came and showed his lord these things. Then the master of the house, being angry, said to his servant, Go out quickly into the streets and lanes of the city, and bring in hither the poor and the maimed and the halt and the blind. And the servant said, Lord, it is done as thou hast commanded, and yet there is room. And the Lord said unto the servant, Go out into the highways and hedges, and compel them to come in, that my house may be filled. For I say unto you that none of those men which were bidden shall taste of my bidden shall taste of my supper. Period.